And welcome back. Sneak attack. I was doing my editing of these videos. I thought, oh, I did not talk about something really important. So I want to do that right now. And that is, it's fun to build a lab environment. It really is. But what is not so fun is building a lab environment and then having to rebuild it like 2 days later because something got corrupted or there's a problem. So I wanted to share with you a few techniques that I use that you can use as well in your lab environment to help preserve the baseline functionality of your lab. So once you have the firewalls up and running, make sure you gracefully shut them down. And I'll include that in another video when we actually get them up and running. And the devices we don't have to worry too much about would be the router, because we have the startup config for that. And also this client PC, which is courtesy of Docker. We don't have to worry too much about that either. So really our two major concerns right here would be gracefully shutting down the Palo Alto firewalls themselves. Once the two PAs are turned off, the way to turn off all the other devices in the topology here is simply to go to the More Actions item here, and then you can click on Stop All Nodes. So I would recommend not doing that for the Palo Alto firewalls because we want to make sure they close gracefully, but for everything else, they'll survive it just fine. So once everything is turned off, I'd also recommend when you're done for the day, over here on the left, there's an option right here for Close Lab, and I'd have you do that as well. So I'm going to click on Close Lab, just make sure everything is closed down nice and easy. And then once it's closed, there's an option here for sorting. I'm going to click on Sort by Date. If we go down here to the bottom, here at the bottom, I've got the I Love Palo Alto lab. And if we hover over it and click on Clone, and I would recommend doing that periodically, at least the base lab before you start it all, clone it to another lab. That way, if you need to go back to it, you can. And then periodically, as you go through, you might want to clone it from time to time, just so you have points which you can go back to if things totally go sideways. Another feature I'd like to chat with you about is shutting down the EVE-NG VM itself, which is running as a VM as part of vSphere, or in this case on the ESXi host. So to shut it down gracefully, if we click on the virtual machines and click on EVE-NG Pro, that VM, now it is running VMware Tools. So here it says VMware Tools Yes, which implies that we could right click and we could hover over Guest OS and do a shutdown, which implies a graceful shutdown. Now over the years, they've modified the power and Guest OS options here, but the concept is if it has VMware Tools and we say shutdown, that should do a graceful shutdown. But if you're not sure or not comfortable that that's going to work well, or in your experience it's not working well, you can also go to the CLI on EVE-NG. You can log in as long as you remember what your credentials are. It's root, sorry about that. And then from here we can do a shutdown -H for halt, and then now, and press enter, and that will do a graceful shutdown as well. So in a few moments, this VM is powered off. So now that that VM is powered off, there's one more option I'd like to share with you, and that is from the hypervisor, taking a snapshot. So snapshots in the world of VMware, we can do that when the machine's running, but it's also going to snapshot the entire, memory space that that VM is using. It's better, in my opinion, it's also going to use a lot less disk space and be a lot faster if you do a snapshot when the VM is actually powered off. And being a good VMware administrator also means that we realize that snapshots shouldn't be kept forever, and that it can also slow performance over time if we leave them indefinitely. So I would say, once in a while, clear up your snapshots, take a new one, and that way it'll give you a point you can go back to as you progress through the labs. So to create a snapshot of that machine, we just, there's lots of ways of doing it. You could right click on the virtual machine, and from the drop down, go to snapshots, and simply click here, take snapshot. So I'm going to call this just after base topology. You can put a description there as well to remind yourself of what this snapshot represents. Because the VM is not running, there's no option to snapshot the virtual memory, and we'll click on take snapshot. So now, as a point in time, we can come back to that snapshot, and we can restore to that snapshot point in time if we need to. And just as a reminder, if we're making a snapshot and we created it like a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, and there's lots and lots of changes, we periodically want to delete the old snapshots and then take more current ones, because the snapshot is not intended as a mechanism for backups. It's intended just to go back for a relatively short period of time to something the way it was before, but not as a backup of your system. So those are the additional tips I wanted to get in this set of videos regarding building a lab environment. And in the next set of videos, what we'll do is we'll then take a look at getting the actual Palo Alto firewalls booted up, initially configured, and on their way to providing network services. So we'll cover that for real in the next set of videos. Meanwhile, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to Thank you for viewing.